Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show here at JB's Deli here in Andersonville, Chicago, with a legendary studio musician and producer, Steele. Welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Okay.
Can you just talk a little bit about, back in the bebop days, in the 50s, the intention of playing that music? You weren't doing it for the dough. You were doing it because it felt good. And I just kind of wanted to know how that music sort of propelled you through the rest of your career.
I would say that it set a base from which I could operate. It was difficult music to play, so you developed your skills on guitar, in my case, to a higher level because we were interested in that type of music. We weren't, as a contrast to somebody that's just playing folk music and learning 6 chords, we were learning some very complex music and therefore had to become very skilled at our instrument.
Would you talk, as best you can, you were still not even an adult at that point, but would you say that language started in the late 40s and then there was no academy you could go to? So it was kind of an oral, even though bebop was so sophisticated, was it sort of a rhythmic learning experience, how did you learn those rhythms? Not every jazz musician can play bebop.
Well, you had to listen to the records. We listened to records, and then we tried to emulate them in live venues. That's how I started. When I was 14, I had the fortune of having three older guys working with me that taught me how to play it, because they already knew how to play it.
Wow.
They needed a guitar player, so they brought me in even though I was younger.
Well, that's perfect. You were playing with older cats that were probably better than you at that time.
Yes.
So what were they taught you? Explain specifically the rhythm part of it. The essential parts of the guitar in the rhythm of bebop.
Well, most of the rhythm, we never played quote rhythm, we comped.
Right.
And it's a whole different thing than just playing 4/4 rhythm like the Freddie Green with the bass.
So explain what the comping is. It's different than the just straight rhythm.
Well, comping is accenting the feel of the drummer.
That's right.
The drummer's laying down a beat. He occasionally hits fills and pops his stick. Oh, you do the same thing. You do the same thing with guitar. You listen to the soloist and maybe even add to what he's doing with a little accent chord or whatnot. And it's just, these aren't big chords. These are little 2 or 3 note motifs that you drop in.
As opposed to just playing that.
As opposed to Freddie Green.
That's right.
Yeah.
Bass. Yeah. Who were some of those records? Would you say Jimmy Raney? Who were some of the bop guitar players that you were listening to relentlessly?
Barney Kissel.
Hero.
Yeah, no question. Barney was the guy. But there was another guy in Chicago, of all places, George Barnes, who was on the staff at NBC.
I cannot believe, my buddy John Lee Shannon, who I've seen the last 2 nights, I'm going here, young cat, younger than me, George Barnes, the deepest pocket. The man he had chops for days. I cannot believe you. I thought he was a New York guy. You're saying he was in Chicago?
He was on NBC staff in Chicago. When I was like 12, I bought a wire recorder, right? Because that's the only recorder you could get, web core. And I set the thing, I got all excited, and I turned on NBC, and George Barnes was featured on a show for a half-hour show playing his original music. That changed my life.
Why?
Hearing George Barnes. And prior to that, of course, Les Paul.
Absolutely. No, it changed your life because he was playing original music in the sort of the bebop context.
Yeah, but he had written this original music with a woodwind quintet. If you could imagine a classical woodwind quintet and George playing bebop, That's what I heard. And I have that recording. I found it. I actually have it.
You taped it off the TV.
No, I taped it on my wire recorder, but I was able. It was those cuts were released, and I now have them.
Where they were cut on vinyl. They were.
Yeah, vinyl.
Do you have any idea what the name of the? Wow, that might very well. That's incredible. I would love to know the name of that album.
Well, I can get you the. It's on CD. I can get you the CD.
I want you. This is so important for younger cats, my generation and younger. Explain. A lot of my generation doesn't even want to hear the word leakage. I want you to talk about good leakage. Maybe a specific example on a session where that came into play, because to me, that makes the music feel good. But the idea of saying no leakage at all, then you're just compressing the sound.
Well, more than compressing, you're eliminating communication between the players. Part of when I did engineering, going into my other career, we used to spend 2 hours, maybe longer, just setting up the room, because we knew where the leakage was going to come from, mainly drums.
Right.
But I would put the singer, if we weren't going to overdub the singer, which initially we did, right near the drums, because if they're going to leak, I want them to be good. I don't want drums to sound like they're 50 feet away.
Across the street, yeah.
Everything leaks into the singer's mic. So that was the domination then. Then when we started overdubbing singing, then it became the strings were the enemy, right? Everything would leak into the string mics. So the acoustical placement was everything certainly in the 70s and 60s. Later on when we started isolating, they started in Chicago. They started putting the drummer in the vocal booth. Believe it or not,
Totally sealed off, right?
totally sealed. They
Not even a gobo, just sealed off.
not sealed off. They got rid of the enemy. The enemy was the drummer. Get rid of him. Put him in the vocal booth.
Enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, he was
All
the
the leakage was coming from that,
acoustical
right? I did.
enemy, right? Because the engineers weren't. Maybe they didn't have time, or they didn't want to deal with the leakage.
How did it become so taboo over time? Like when you came in, was it a trial and error thing, or were people already saying, "Hey, Ron, there is such thing as good leakage"?
Nobody ever said that.
It was a feel thing.
We
Yeah.
just you had to feel it. There's an example. Creed Taylor, which was everybody
I've
knows.
interviewed him 3. I mean, rest in peace, my hero. Right?
He worked at this studio. Guys, it's in a living room somewhere in some obscure place.
Well, no, Rudy Van Gelder's
Rudy
studio.
Van Gelder,
The
yeah.
optometry, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I listened to when I was in engineering. We all listened to Van Gelder. What's he doing? Right? Well, one time I did an album with Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt called Boss Tenors.
Yes.
And the producer came, I think it was Creed from New York, to Chicago. So I got this group, and he's all hyper because who the hell is Ron Steele?
Ron Steele.
He can't know anything, right? So anyway, it was very tense for the first maybe half hour.
Sure.
But then I finally got the sound that he wanted, and that album, I think it was a very successful album.
Specifically, what was the sound he was looking for exactly?
Everything in your face, tight. And to do that, again, I tried to get the 2 horn players right near the drums. The bass player was, of course, an acoustic upright.
Was it almost like a situation where you had everybody really close together? If it wasn't a singing group, where you'd have them all. I mean, a lot of the old jazz records.
Yeah.
Even Russ Gary, I don't know if you know that name, great engineer. He would put Cal Jader's group in Wally Hyder's, and they'd be in a small room in a circle, and he'd drop a mic over.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, Omni. That's not a bad way to go.
Was that part of your before you got your sort of? I know you talked about miking, I think under the hi hat.
Yeah.
You know, did you do any sessions where you would just drop a mic?
No.
Never.
No. In that case, those kind of things, the difficult part, believe it or not, was the piano. Everything leaked into the piano. Well, then we figured out to put a microphone on the third hole. They call it the C hole, I think. Anyway, that worked for 90% of the stuff. That's pretty much how we did the acoustical jazz and stuff like that.
So when you first started as a studio musician, you recognized that it was not going to be enough to be a livelihood to support a family. Is that right?
Yes. No, I wasn't even a studio musician then. I was just a musician doing gigs, whatever,
Jingles.
weddings.
But I mean, you were part of the registry. I mean, they call you. I know you were low on the totem pole, but I mean, they call you.
The way it works, I never called anybody for a job.
Ever.
Except one guy.
Yeah, one guy.
Which I told you
Yeah,
about.
that Bobby Christian.
Bobby Christian.
And then, you know.
But anyway, that got me a girl, you know.
Right. Your wife.
Anyway, it's word to word. There was a time at RCA when I was an engineer, about 3 years in, where I wasn't doing hardly any gigging as a guitar player. And I had mentally made up my mind to concentrate on engineering. I was doing well. I was doing some heavy stuff, you know, so
Absolutely.
maybe I should just do this. Within a couple of weeks to that, I got a call from a guy who I never heard of. He says, "Hey, you play guitar?" Yeah, I said, "Yeah." He says, "Do you play bass guitar?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I got this gig at McCormick Place, which is a big, huge venue in Chicago, with this big show, and they need a bass guitar player and a guitar player. I mean, you have to play both, and it's a very important part." And he says, "Can you make it?" "Well, I have a full-time job at RCA, right?" And I said, "Yeah, that's the kind of guy I am. I like challenges." I didn't even.
I just want to be clear. This was not an electric Fender bass. This was a bass
Yes,
guitar.
it was. And that was a period where nobody had electrics. So I didn't even own one. But I play bass.
Yeah.
I knew how to play bass. So I went to a pawn shop and bought one. Literally, I found one at a pawn shop. And it happens to be the Fender 6, which today is worth $10,000.
You still have yours?
Huh?
You still have it?
Yeah, still have it.
My God.
So I get the Fender 6. I go to this gig. There's 50 pieces in the orchestra. Florence Henderson is the featured singer, and there's one number that was me and Florence. And so I had to practice it.
You already had your reading chops together a little
Oh
bit?
yeah, I was a good reader, and so I played it. I played it perfectly, and the conductor said, "You're the first guy that ever played that, right?" And he's from New York, right? But here's the thing: there were 50 guys in that orchestra that heard me do it. My phone never quit ringing after that because all of my calls were from references from the guys I played with.
This was good a time period, 59, 60?
63.
Yeah, that's right. You were right on, way ahead of the curve on that.
63. So what I'm saying is
It was word of mouth.
word of mouth is how you get gigs.
I'm not sure if he's still with us. I just feel like it's important for you to talk about the contributions. James Jamerson gets all the pub. Chuck Rainey, my dear friend. I mean, rightfully so. These guys are legends.
Right,
Louis Satterfield was as well.
right.
Talk about Louis a little bit and sort of the sound that him and Maurice White, or the sound that they gave to the Chicago sound, of the studio sound.
Well, Louis was on all the Chess recordings, of course, and I worked with Louis many times. And in fact, we started getting, I did. I helped Louis get into the jingle stuff in Chicago too, because the jingle producers wanted to be current too. So they wanted the same funk feel that these guys had.
Suds and duds.
So
and, yeah.
I introduced Louis and Phil Upchurch to some of the producers I worked with, and that was an important thing. Louis was. I love working with Louis.
Did he play upright bass or only
No,
electric?
electric. Never saw him play upright.
Because he was really the one. I mean, his sound was very singular. I mean, very unique.
Well, on bass you can just play a series of notes, but if you punctuate accent certain notes, make some longer or shorter, and do it in the right context with the track, that's priceless. And Louis had that ability. So did Jamerson. Jamerson is probably responsible for half of Motown's hits.
I'm wondering, I'm just going to go on a limb. Did you actually ever, I know did you work with Jerry Butler at all?
Believe it or not, I recorded Jerry Butler as an engineer.
I believe.
Yeah. I did one of his hits. I can't remember which one.
Really?
Yeah.
I was going to say, because there was one album he did, I'm pretty sure it was in Chicago, might have been at your studio.
At RCA.
I don't know this for a fact, but the rhythm section, and it might have been overdubbed from LA because Motown had moved, but the rhythm section, the reason it caught my attention, it was Jamerson and James Gadsden. And this is early 70s. I'll get the name of it.
In
But
Chicago?
well, that's where the record came out. And I have to believe that those cats came in. It was one of Jamerson's last sessions before he died.
Yeah, I never worked with Jamerson.
Never worked James. Okay, so that was that. So you did produce a Jerry Butler hit, or you
No,
engineered.
Yeah.
What was that like? First of all, you would just hear that tune on every radio station. Explain what that feeling was like when you would hear a tune that you helped cultivate.
Well, I'd like to say that I was thrilled, but it was just when you do this stuff every day. Oh, well, that's cool. They got it on the air already.
Right. Let's move on.
Yeah. What's next?
It was that hot, though. It was that pulsating. It's so remarkable. Your sons are in the music business
Yes.
today. Are they doing stuff along the same lines as you, or are they doing stuff non?
Well, they did. They both were very involved in the rock and roll scene, and very close to. They had contracts, but that never worked out.
Right.
They did the whole rock and roll thing. Then they got into production, producing music for commercials and stuff like that, jingles and whatnot. Today, two of my boys are doing music and sound design for games.
You know, I just was going to say, I mean, they kind of knew what it was because you were their dad, but the anonymity within the studio today is so disheartening for me. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about, I don't know, for hungry cats out there, just how soulful and how beautiful it is when everybody's hitting at the same time. And in some ways you don't have all these, I'm going back to the days of the early 60s, mid 60s, everybody had to hit at the same time. You couldn't really go back and fix mistakes. And because there was so much work, you couldn't perseverate on one song for hours or days or weeks.
No, we had. If we took an hour for a song, that was too long.
Too long.
Right. And so that was the way it started. Then what happened is we did a song in an hour, sometimes with the vocal, but usually they overdubbed the vocal eventually. But then when they got 4-track, then suddenly, okay, that guitar solo, we'll put it on track 3 because we had an extra track,
That's
right?
right.
And within, it seems like months, we were at the 8-track. And then I remember when I had built my studio, I ordered an 8-track, a Scully 8-track. And there were so many people ordering them, you had to wait 6 months, right? By the time I got the 8-track, it was 16. So now the 8-tracks are arriving and we're obsolete. I had to buy a 16.
So I want to be clear though, even if because your magic in the studio was unparalleled, but if you didn't have the current technology, even if the record sounded good, it would be obsolete?
Yeah. And the more tracks we got, the longer the artists and the producers would take to produce.
That's what the point was, that you were like, as the more tracks that you got, the less soulful the music got, the more sterile it got.
There were too many options. In other words, we went from zero options
I did.
to infinity.
You know what? We're going through the same thing in our media structure now too, where you used, you talk about 3 TV channels. When you saw the Beatles, I don't know if on Ed Sullivan with the sit, I don't know if they had the sitar at that time, but there was like a manageable stream of information.
Right.
And now the options are endless, and some of them, quite frankly, are bringing us down. And so it went from nothing and a lot more just sort of street scholar, learning on your own kind of stuff to, and then just not having the ability. Yes, I get it. A lot of people would challenge me and say, I don't want to listen to a record where there's a splice or there's a flub. To me, that's some of the magic. I mean, I told you this story, but not in the complete version. David Spinoza, the great session guitar
Yes.
player, Arif Mardin and Dr. John called him into the studio in New York. He was on his way to a jingle. He had just finished a session. They said, hey, give me, you got your amp? Come in here. They said, listen, this is a track for the meters. It was supposed to be a sax solo, but we want you to do a guitar solo. So let's round this out and hit it. He goes in and he overbent a string. All right, finishes the take. He's like, let me do that again. They're like, no, we're done. Perfect, done. All right, he was pissed. He left, went on to it because he was working. A few weeks later, gets in a cab with 6 different string instruments going to a session. The cab driver's like, hey man, listen, this is my new favorite tune. It was called Right Place, Wrong Time. Great, it was a Dr. John tune. And he throws it, and David's like, oh yeah, I'm a guitar player on that. Taxi driver's like, you're full of shit. But it was just, it was Wild West.
Yeah.
And the Wild West, but when you say Wild West, I want to be clear. I don't want to sound naive, but did people get hurt? Was it still a racket, or did everybody kind of make out okay, or did people still get ripped off? Today, it's like you go on Spotify, you need 14,000 downloads, you make $10. It's a joke. The amount of money that's coming back to the actual artists themselves is minuscule. And I just wonder when you say Wild West, if you really meant that cats like you, not that you were power hungry, but you had a lot more creative control and a lot more ability to have a livelihood in music because of that.
Yes, it was unparalleled.
Explain why. This is so important. This is why I do my show.
Well, in terms of record business, I was involved in a record company, and we would sign people. I remember a quick story.
Yeah.
Styx. We were looking for anybody to sign, so this group auditioned. They went to my studio. They set up in the studio. It took them, I don't know, speakers.
Right.
It was like a rock concert, right?
STYX, right? Yeah.
STYX, yeah. So they come in, and they're a Chicago group. They're from Chicago, and we heard them, and it was literally, they were so loud that we couldn't stand in the studio with them. We were listening to them through a control room window. That's how loud they were. And I thought they were very talented, but I just couldn't
Hear them. It just didn't feel
I couldn't
good.
hear them. I couldn't feel it. I didn't get any feeling from them. It was just loud.
Yeah.
Well, they later signed with a subsidiary of RCA, and all of their albums bombed. They had 4 albums. They all bombed. Or I don't know if it was albums or singles, but anyway, they bombed, except the last one. And their contract lapsed. And this other guy, Chicago producer that had them, gave up and he walked away. So they've got this song on the air, and they kept a promoter kept pounding it. The song was Lady, I think, and that became a big hit. Here they're sitting there with the biggest hit in the country and no contract. That was heaven for them. They could demand anything they wanted.
Right.
I don't feel like we missed out in not signing them, but it's an unusual record story. And that's the kind of way the business was. There was another case I was called to do a session in Omaha with a producer there, which is unusual. I hop a plane with my guitars, bam, I fly down to Omaha. And I'm in this studio that's underground, of all things. Omaha's an interesting place. Anyway, we did this jingle session. It was a jingle, and so I played bass on it. That $10,000 bass, by the way.
Yeah, right.
And,
Yeah, no, that's unreal.
and
I
guitar,
love it. Yeah.
right? And we did it, and then I go home. They paid me, whatever, $100 then probably or something, plus the airfare. I get home, and I get a couple months later. I get a call, Ron. Could you come out? We got to do an album. And I said, oh yeah. What's it about? She said, well, remember that jingle we did? I'll cut to the short to part of the story. The jingle was Convoy, which is the biggest record hit of that year, and I think it was '85.
What is Convoy?
Convoy is a song about the truck drivers and
Oh my God, that was you?
C.W. McCall.
Yes,
And so
that was you.
that was me playing bass and guitar on it. And Convoy went, I sold millions of copies.
Gold, yeah.
It created a record company in Omaha called American Gramophone. That was they built a record company out of it. It was a crazy, but nobody knew what was going to happen. It just happened.
Right. What about? I don't want to miss this. Explain your role early on with the Nashville scene.
What Nashville?
Chet Atkins.
Oh, Chet, yeah. I'm sorry, you said Nashville.
Nashville, yeah.
Okay, when I was at RCA, I was, one day they came and said, Ron, can you go to Nashville for a while? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the engineer quit. And they got some stuff they want to do, and I need an engineer. And again, I like challenges. I said, yeah, sure. I'll leave my 6 kids and my wife and go to Nashville. So I'm staying in a motel. I go to the studio, and there's a girl there. She's she ran the office. That was it. It was me and her. I had a key. I never met anybody else, right? And so I said to the girl, well, what's going on? She says, well, Ron, it's kind of slow right now. I'll let you know. She comes to me like 3 days later and says, Elvis is coming in Sunday. And I said, whoa, what? And he says, yeah, I'll be here. And I said, on Sunday? I says, yeah. So I naturally, I'm a young guy, and I'm about to record the biggest artist in the world.
What year is this? Late 60s?
63, 4, somewhere in there.
Early, yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact year.
I cannot. So the Colonel was there?
No, wait a minute.
Go ahead.
So I go on Sunday. I'm there at 10 o'clock in the morning for a 2 o'clock session. I want everything perfect,
Sure.
right? Checking, double checking. All we had was one machine, an Ampex recorder, and an old radio console with knobs that do this, and that was it. It was 2-track.
Is the name of this? Do you remember the name of the studio or no?
RCA.
RCA. Okay, so RCA Studio.
But
Just you and the woman, yeah.
RCA, it was called RCA Studio. Chet Atkins owned it. Secretly owned it. He built it. And RCA hired him as to run the studio.
Sure.
Whatever. So I get to the session. Nobody's there. Finally, Pig, I can't, that's what everybody calling the piano player, shows up.
Pig Hargis.
Yeah.
Blind.
Yeah, he shows up.
Oh,
Somebody helped him.
This is legend.
And I said, what time is the session? It's 2 o'clock. He said, oh, don't worry, Ron, they'll be here. Oh, the guys started coming in, and they're all the key guys, Elvis's players.
Yeah.
And a couple of good studio players.
Yeah, Bob Moore maybe.
Yeah, Bob Moore was
yeah.
there. So by 6 o'clock, they're all there. I'm ready to go, and I said, where's Elvis? It's now 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, the bell rings, because that's what was it. It was me and these guys. The bell rings, and there's Elvis getting off his motorcycle. And I introduced him. He's very nice. He said, yeah, Ron.
Really good guy, yeah.
Great to work with you, Ron. So we go in the studio, and he says, let's eat.
Hamburgers.
Yeah.
Cheeseburgers.
Well, now they order food. Now this is this is a 2 o'clock session. It's now 7 o'clock. We haven't even heard a note.
You're on the clock the whole time?
Yeah, the reason is Elvis wanted his guys to get overtime. He wanted to run the clock. Okay, so we finally at maybe 7:30 he plays them a cassette, and they're all in Nashville. You write little things on pieces of paper, and say, let's run it. So they're running it, and I'm scrambling to get a kind of a balance because I haven't heard anything yet. And then he says, "Well, can we put one down, Ron?" No, there's nobody in the studio except me. There was no producer. There was nothing. Just me, Elvis, and the band. And so I started recording, and I realized I didn't have a good mix at all.
Right.
Because I didn't have time. And
Well, no, because there was no sound check. It was just
no
like...
sound, nothing. So we got through it, and I said, he looked at me, I said, "Elvis, I think we could do a better one." I was covering for myself.
Of course.
He says, "All right, Ron." So we did
All right, Ron.
we did another one, right? And then I played it back for him, and the guys are all listening to it, and Elvis looks at me and he says, "What do you think, Ron?" I said, "It sounded pretty good." He says, "All right, ship it." That was it.
Because I remember talking to Norbert Putnam. I don't know if you ever crossed paths with him. He was the bass player for Elvis. Later in the 60s, became a hallmark Nashville player.
Yes.
Later, though,
Yeah.
and he would say Elvis would like to listen back and get into this stuff, but he just trusted your ear on it and was
Yeah.
like, "Let's do it. We're done."
Yes.
You did one tune that whole night.
Two.
Two tunes.
Yeah.
Oh my!
It's documented in a book.
On your computer.
No. There's a,
in his
a
book.
book about Elvis where my session was documented. But that's the way we did things then. Now, here's the other thing. There was 2 studios in town. The Barn, which was Columbia, and RCA, which is the one I was. There were 2 engineers in all of Nashville then. Just 2. Me and Bradley, Bill Bradley.
Right.
That was it. And I often think, well, to finish the story, after the Elvis session, the next day, Chet comes down to talk to me. He says, "Hey, Ron, how do you feel? You want to work for us here?" And I turned him down, basically. I told him I didn't want to move to Nashville. I got kids, whatever.
Yeah.
And I often think if I'd have been the second engineer in Nashville, where would I be today?
Well, being that you're so humble, I don't know. Man, it wasn't like you were starving to death up here either. You were already pretty supplanted. But that early mid '60s was such a fertile time in Nashville. It's incredible. Before I let you go, you were taking direction your whole life as an accompanist for the most part. Obviously, when you had your own studio, you had a little more power. But as a musician, for the most part, you had to play what they wanted you to play. Everybody's Baby was a chance for you to make your own statement.
Yes.
Tell the world the Ron Steele statement, not just on this album, but in general, the philosophy that you tried to get through with Everybody's Baby.
I wanted to create funky, fun music that's enjoyable, and of course my roots from chess and whatnot, and sitting next to Phil Upchurch and guys like that. I wanted to recreate that with a whole bunch of different guitar textures, and as on the album, there's all kinds of different instruments, including mandolin on
Sitar.
guitar, 12-string. I played the bass parts. Of course, I hired a drummer, Tommy Radke played drums, but
And Bobby Christian.
and Bobby Christian's on it. But it was just, I was trying to be Les Paul in a different way.
Ron Steele, man, it's so good to meet you in person, man. It's such an honor, and I had such a ball with you. I look forward to doing it again really soon. Thanks for being part of the show. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. See you later.